This film was actually Ted Kotcheff's second adaptation of The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz.
You're done? Yes.
Yeah,
of
sure.
course, perfect. Now we are heading to the Q&A section. If you have any question from our presenter, just raise your hand so that I see you, and please make your questions short, not too long. Anybody? Yes, Pema.
This is a reference to your the agent. Why they couldn't find an actor in that time that they can play in that movie in Toronto, for example, in Toronto?
Well, you see, this is, I mean, one of the things that was interesting is that most of the key roles in Duddy Kravitz were played by American and British actors. What Ted Kotcheff was often criticized for that. And what he said was that, this is what he said. He said that there just weren't enough good actors in Canada at that time to cast this movie the way he wanted to. Now the other thing too is you know, Kotcheff at that point had been working with some of the greatest English-speaking actors in the world on the stage in London, right? So his standards were probably pretty high. But the other thing too is that it was always considered more commercially viable to have American movie stars in Canadian movies, and that has been a kind of a persistent phenomenon and way of thinking. You know, whether or not it ever makes any difference, I'm not altogether sure. Because the fact is that, you know, I mean, probably at the time that this movie was cast, the actor playing Duddy's father, Jack Warden, was probably the best known cast member. You know, because Richard Dreyfuss, as I say, he'd only made the one movie, and he just kind of like, but by the time this came out, he was huge, but not at the time he was making the movie. You know, but that was Kotcheff's feeling, was that he had to cast outside of Canada because their pool of acting talent just wasn't deep enough. I think probably, but I think also there were box office considerations. You see, the other thing too is that this film was picked up for distribution by an American studio, Paramount, and that was something that was also very unusual. I think it was one of the very first Canadian films to be picked up by an American studio for distribution. So it had very high profile.
Thank you. Cyrus, yes.
How successful was this film in the United States?
It was reasonably successful. I don't know the numbers. I do know that it made the first year that it was released in Canada, it made $1 million. You know, that doesn't. But in 1974 money, that was a lot of money for a Canadian film. The film played fairly widely in the United States, and you can check this because certainly there's, you know, it was reviewed by Pauline Kael in the New Yorker, who was one of the leading film critics, American film critics at the time, and probably would have played most of the major centers. I'm not entirely, I doubt it would have played as widely, for example, as something like Jaws did, but I think that anywhere where there was probably a fairly busy film exhibition structure in a city was probably shown there. But it was really, I mean, I saw it, I remember seeing it at a shopping mall in St. Catharines, which is where I was living as a high school student. So it was very widely, in Canada anyway.
I mean,
yes, the story that you tell about the director is interesting. You said that it was his first Canadian movies, and although it was his first Canadian movies, he was successful to raise the money. But when, and as you said, this money sold very good, and it was very commercially successful. And I'm also thinking of, I think at that time, FB should be also an operation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Was,
just
yes.
wondering why nobody's become more interested to finance this movie considering it's successful. Is it because of anti-Semitism? Was it political reasons that nobody decided to finance his movies and he decided to leave? Because logically, everything is good to help these directors raise money for his second movie.
No, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and the thing that it kind of it sort of defies logic because it was a successful movie. Richler and Kotcheff were a proven team together. But it would be very interesting to hear Ted Kotcheff talk about that. He has said that that is the reason why he ultimately left Canada. When he came back to make The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, he thought that that was going to be his return to Canada, that he was going to stay and he was going to continue to make films. And so when he left as a result of the fact that the subsequent film, St. Urban's Horseman, that he wanted to make with Richler, they couldn't finance. There could have been some controversy. There could have been some controversy. I know that there was some talk, I can't remember if it was Kotcheff, maybe it was. Kotcheff suspected that when the film was turned down by the Cannes Film Festival, that they were uncomfortable with it. They were uncomfortable with the depiction of Duddy Kravitz. But the point of that is that one of the hardest things to do in this country has been to maintain a filmmaking career. Now, you've spoken with Don Shabib, and you've probably seen enough of Canadian films to know that there are a lot of filmmakers who make wonderful and amazing first films, and then you don't see them again. You don't hear from them again, or they go into television, or something like that happens. Right? It's very, very, very difficult. And I think that Kotcheff felt that when he had made the most successful movie ever made in English Canada, and he couldn't raise money for another film, and he was working with one of Canada's leading novelists, then he was going to leave Canada if he had to make films.
I'll let you to ask. Connie, you wanted to comment
yes, I just
on
wanted to
this?
follow up. The people who raise money for films are producers, and neither Kotcheff nor Richler were producers. And I think it's a common error that is made in the film industry, that one thinks that the success will follow. But knowing how to raise money is a whole art, and it's very different from directing and writing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the story of,
Yeah.
of their effort, but Kemeny,
Yeah.
who was the producer of this film, went on and is also the producer of the last film we're going to see, Atlantic City, and actually was so successful as a producer that he too eventually moved down to Hollywood. So producing is a function, and I'm not sure that they had a producer at the time.
They might. I don't know how far that project actually. I mean, I'm not sure. Did they have a completed script? I do know that the story is, and the one that Kotcheff has told for years and years and years, is that they spent a year and a half.
Well, I was this is just an aside, but
Yeah.
I was very interested in the University of Toronto story about Kotcheff.
Yeah.
That it says he was the producer of this film,
Yeah.
which he was not.
No.
So it's very interesting how, I don't know what went on in his mind.
Well, he's the last one standing. I guess he can take credit.
Thank you. We go to the next question. Ahmed. Yes.
I guess the city of Montreal is very well portrayed in this movie.
Yes.
You can and I know you know better than me that the city somehow, the people who live in Montreal are poor from Francophone, Anglophone,
Yeah.
and Jewish community
Yeah.
and Dutch.
Yeah.
And these three, at least these three communities are well portrayed in the movie and I guess in the novel.
Yeah.
You said the writer of the novel is from Montreal, right?
Yes.
And he belongs to which of these communities?
Jewish. Yeah. Working
He's
class.
Jewish.
Yeah. Yeah. The character of Duddy Kravitz is always somebody that Mordecai Richler said that he knew very well, and I think that part of the controversy of the film, and part of the reason why a lot of Jewish people were uncomfortable with the film, was that they felt the same way about Duddy Kravitz that some of the other characters in the movie do, right? There were other characters in the movie. Two of the most kind of like anti-Semitic things that are said about Duddy in the movie are said by other Jewish characters, right? And I think that was part of the reason why. Richler was someone, and who he also he liked to get a rise out of people. He really liked to get, and he was fearless in terms of no one could tell him how to properly portray characters. No one was going to tell him how to do that. No one was going to tell him what his experience was. This is my experience. But I think that the interesting thing is that the character of Duddy is the more times I see the film, he's interesting because he really just wants a home. It's really that simple. And the idea of land is one thing, the idea of money is one thing. But for example, he doesn't have a mother. His father neglects him. He feels he feels the closest person he feels the person he feels closest to is probably his grandfather. And really, what Duddy is just trying to do is in everywhere he turns, he doesn't really belong. Right, everywhere he turns. And I thought that what was interesting about the movie is that it is very, very complex in terms of its understanding and depiction of different kinds of experiences and class experiences, cultural experiences, religious experiences. I mean, all of that stuff is dealt with in a very, very interesting way in Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. And that's one of the things I really like about the film, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. Hamid, you ask. And next, Maggie.
So there was this kind of this short story inside the movie about when Duddy actually becomes a producer.
Yes, right. Yes.
So like talking about the movie production. So I'm wondering whether this was actually in the story or it was something that was added for the movie version, because it kind of like it's interesting because there is kind of a joke about making art movies, and at the same time kind of joke about producers, how producers are in it for a different reason versus like a drunk director. So I want to hear your take.
Well, it's very interesting. I think he does, that is one of his scams in the book, right? Is making films and the bar mitzvah films. What's interesting about that is that the novel's actually set and the movie as well in the 1950s, right? And when there would have been almost like nobody was producing films at that point in time. And so that was definitely that is part of the original source material. But I do think that the treatment of the character, I can't remember his name, the director, the alcoholic director, who makes that, who makes that amazing bar mitzvah film. I think that is probably something that Ted Kravitz was especially inspired by, was the idea of kind of making an absolutely inappropriate art film. And of course, what's interesting is that I can't remember what the response is of the first person who the lights come up and they're all kind of like staring at the screen. And
let's call it art.
Yeah, something. It isn't. Yeah. But I think that yes, that was part of the original novel. But I think it was given probably an especially delighted treatment by the director.
Thank you. You're next.
Sorry. It was a great film, and it's amazing to see Richard Dreyfuss when he was so young.
Yeah.
Because I've seen plenty of Richard Dreyfuss films, but sort of when he was older,
Right.
Mr. Holland's Opus,
Yes, right.
those sorts of things. So this was a real treat, and he does the character. I can't imagine, like you said, that he doesn't like his own performance because he's so, perhaps because he is so believable. He's so he's such a scumbag, but he's so likable at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
And just interesting that you said, I love that you said that Mordecai Richler said that, oh, you're not going to tell me how to portray people that I knew growing up. And I love that answer because he's not going to be politically correct. And that's what's great about this film, and how wonderfully self-deprecating Jewish comedians and writers are about themselves. I mean, it's so tongue-in-cheek. Absolutely. Marrying shiksas and things like that. So I was just wondering if you could mention sort of some of the themes that he's tackled in the film, like some that I picked up: morality, greed, Judaism as a religious following versus just as a ethnicity or a cultural group belonging to. There was so many wonderful, and then the Jew versus the Gentile, and the mobster, who at the end of the day, he is a sort of he's a mirror for Duddy. Where you go, well, at the end of the day, no one really cared how he made his money. He hustled his way to the top the same way Duddy did. In the beginning, he was selling the transfer tickets.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I think there's some great themes, and maybe you can enlighten us on some of the ideas.
The interesting thing is that on the one hand, the character of Duddy Kravitz is very much of a kind, a figure in Jewish literature, Jewish North American literature. You find characters like that in Philip Roth. You find characters like that. Bud Schulberg's What Makes Sammy Run, if you're familiar with that. And in the writing of Saul Bellow as well. And that is of the ambitious, striving young Jewish man who will do anything in order to succeed, right? And that has been a stereotype that some people have been very uncomfortable with. But the thing about Richler, and certainly I think some of the other writers as well too, is Duddy's ambition is placed in the context of his world. It's placed in the context of, we see how limited his choices are. We see him basically being driven to succeed, to prove himself, because it's the only way he can get people to pay attention to him, to take him seriously.
And I think that's what's so likable about the character.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that I just quickly looked up Richler's Wikipedia page. And, for example, it said his father was a scrap worker as a scrap maker shop. So you can really see that there was real life put into this.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing too is that Richler also wrote very specifically about the Jewish experience in Montreal. In Montreal, and in a number of his novels in Montreal. So what he was doing was very kind of, he always wrote about the world that he knew and that was right around him. And that particular neighborhood, the St. Urbain neighborhood, in that part of the city, but also just the suggestion of the kind of like almost like the island of Jewish culture, which is surrounded by the Francophones and surrounded by the rich Anglos who are living in Westmount and that kind. And there is just a very, very, as I say, constant sensitivity to the fact that this is just one small slice of a larger urban experience. But he always did focus on that. And many of Richler's characters are unpleasant, ambitious characters. And they are often doing things which are disastrous, which can be fatal to people living around them. They often have a kind of a success that they themselves will undermine, right, by doing something inadvisable. And they're usually characters who are not satisfied with who they are. That is probably Richler's most common character. And you see variations. As he got older, he tended to write protagonists who were his age, more or less his age. And so what you can see is, they're not all Duddy Kravitz, but as you go through the books, you can see basically how Richler's idea of this particular kind of character changed as he got older. But as far as he was concerned, I think he felt that the Jewish community that he grew up in was a marginalized community. It was surrounded by anti-Semitism. It was a community that needed to work extra hard to be taken seriously. And it was a community that was isolated from everything around it. And so for all of those conditions led to the behavior of Duddy Kravitz. You know, Duddy Kravitz isn't just a greedy kid, right? No, he's not at all. He's not at all. And that's one of the great things about the movie is that